Okay, so you all meet in a tavern.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
It was 10 days until the campaign. The players were still creating their characters, but the GM's nightmares were growing steadily worse. See, didn't I tell you there was a better way to create characters for a role-playing game? Yes, you're very smart. Shut up. The very best role-playing campaigns aren't about plot. They're about characters. These are the tables where the characters live vividly in your imagination, and the chemistry between the PCs is so thick it could be cut with a knife. We know this to be true, but nevertheless often leave it up to pure chance. We throw together a bunch of random characters, have them meet in a tavern, and hope that maybe lightning will strike. The truth, of course, is that this type of chemistry is more art than science. There's no way to guarantee that a particular group of characters will gel, but there's definitely stuff we can do to prime the pump. Let's start with a relationship circle. You can probably pull this off in less than 10 minutes during character creation. Simply go around the table and ask each player to create a pre-existing relationship between their character and one of the other PCs. When you define your relationship with another PC, you're establishing a critical fact about both characters. You can make it any kind of relationship, but it should be an important one. Family relationships, mothers, sons, uncles, wives, heirs, and the like, can be the easiest to think of, and may prove the most dramatic in play. Close friendships, co-workers, and the like can also be strong choices. Choosing to be enemies can be a very strong choice, but should be approached with caution. At the very least, you'll need to come up with an even stronger reason why the two of you are being forced to work together, and you may still have to accept that one or both of those characters will end up exiting the campaign at some point. On that note, because the player creating the relationship is asserting a fact onto another player's character, you'll often want to give that player the right to veto the relationship. It may be more useful, though, to think about how the relationship can be modified rather than rejected. Although simple, these relationships create emotional and practical bonds between the characters, binding them together before play begins. For a slightly more elaborate technique, let's take a page from the Dresden Files role-playing game and create an adventure legacy. First, go around the table and have each player create the story skeleton for their adventure. Dresden Files suggests a simple formula. When something happens, your protagonist pursues a goal. But will your protagonist succeed when antagonist provides opposition? For example, when Kamar's crops begin glowing with a sickly green light, Elfar must find the source of the supernatural curse before his people starve. But will Elfar succeed before the village is overwhelmed by the radioactive zombies emerging from the vault of the Elder Things? Or, when Princess Buttercup is kidnapped, Wesley must return as the Man in Black to rescue the love of his life. But can he outfox the legendary strategist Vizzini without revealing the true identity of the dread pirate Roberts? Once everyone has established their story skeleton, go around the table again. This time, however, each player will cast their own character as a guest star in one of the other PC's adventures. These supporting roles usually take one of three forms. They complicate a situation, solve a situation, or both. For example, Loronica's efforts to alchemically nullify the poisonous fruit failed, but when she ate of the white apple, she was possessed of strange visions. She was able to provide Elfar with a map of the vault of the Elder Things. Inigo Montoya was working for the criminal mastermind Vizzini. Although impressed by the Man in Black's skill, he was bound by duty to stop his rescue attempt. They fought a mighty duel atop the cliffs of insanity. The players don't need to do this in isolation. In fact, they should be encouraged to bounce ideas around and talk about how the adventure should be developed and what contribution the guest star could make. You're a master swordsman, right? You know what would be cool is if you wanted a challenge, so you decided to fight with only your left hand instead of your right. Yeah, and I switched back, but then it turns out that I was doing the same thing! Each player should select a different adventure to guest star it. So once you've gone around the table once, everyone should have an adventure, be guest starring in an adventure, and have someone guest starring in their adventure. If you'd like, you can now go around the table a third time and have everyone guest star in an additional adventure. If you do, characters shouldn't revisit stories they've already guest starred in. They should visit a new adventure, which will mean that each adventure will have a starring character and two different guest stars. This will knit the group together even tighter, and these connections will often provide a natural explanation for why they're all teaming up for the first adventure of the campaign with a shared backstory that can continue being developed during play. Now, to create a group with even greater dramatic potential, deeper relationships, and a ton of tension ripe for actual play, you can take things a step further by creating a drama map. This technique is inspired by the drama system, a generic storytelling engine designed by Robin D. Laws. You've probably never heard of it because it's been cleverly hidden away inside a rulebook called Hillfolk. Hillfolk is an odd duck of a book. There's about 50 pages of generic rules describing the drama system, then about 15 or 20 pages dedicated to Hillfolk, a game of Iron Age drama, and then another 150 pages providing everything you need to use the drama system to play in another 30 or so settings. In other words, there's about 200 pages of drama system in there and less than a couple dozen pages of Hillfolk. But I digress. My point is that the drama system, hidden though it may be, is really cool. You should check it out, even if you're not interested in the Iron Age setting of Hillfolk. For today, though, we're just going to focus on harvesting its character creation system and turning it into a cap system. If you're not familiar with them, a cap system can be used in conjunction with other RPGs. You can think of it as a system that goes over the top of another RPG, or as a funny little hat your favorite RPG is wearing. Whatever works for you. Now, in creating our drama map, we'll start by going around the table and having each player define a role for their PC in the group. Write the characters' names and roles on a large sheet of paper. If you're playing D&D, the game will provide you with some easy defaults. The warrior, the wizard, the rogue, the healer. But you might want to challenge yourself to choose roles that are more specific to your unique group. For example, if you're playing in the 5th edition Stone Age fantasy setting of Plangea, the PCs might have different roles in their tribe. The leader, the elder, the oracle, the hunter, and so forth. In a Star Trek campaign, on the other hand, you'd have the captain, science officer, engineer, chief security officer, etc. Now, on that note, don't necessarily shy away from a clearly defined chain of command here. Role-playing games often do that, but the tensions within a well-defined chain of command can be a rich source of dramatic play. You can also bear in mind that chains of command aren't necessarily linear. Different characters can have ultimate power over different spheres of influence. Check out the history of the USSR Politburo if you want to see the excitement that can generate. Now, as the players choose their roles, you may notice that they leave behind some jagged holes. For example, maybe none of the PCs in a pirate ship take on the role of the captain, or one of them is the captain, but none of them is the navigator. Those holes are a prompt to you as the GM, who should fill them with compelling NPCs. While the PC should of course remain the main characters of the campaign, these NPCs are likely to become some of the most important members of your supporting cast, so create them with care. Once all the players have chosen their roles, each player in reverse order will define the relationship between their PC and another PC. This is similar to the relationship circle we talked about earlier, but we're going to repeat the process until each character has a relationship with every other character. As you're doing this, take the sheet of paper with the characters' names on it and create a relationship map by drawing lines between each of the characters and labeling those lines with the nature of their relationship. Once the relationship map is complete, each player will declare what their character's desire is. To quote Laws, a desire is the broadly stated, strong motivation driving a character's actions during dramatic scenes. A character's desire moves them to pursue an inner, emotional goal, which can only be achieved by engaging with other members of the main cast, and to a lesser degree, with the recurring characters run by the GM. The character's desire might be seen as their weakness. It makes them vulnerable to others, placing their happiness in other people's hands. This creates dramatic action because conflict between the characters will prevent them from easily or permanently satisfying their desires. Another way to think about desire is as a reward that they seek from others. The most powerful choices for your desire are generally the simplest: approval, acceptance, forgiveness, respect, love, subservience, reassurance, power, to punish, or to be punished. Note that these are emotional, not practical goals. If you find yourself drawn to a practical goal, delve past it to find the emotional need behind it. Veruca Salt, for example, craves material things in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but it's because she's desperately trying to elicit true affection from her father and others. Finding the emotional core of your need is both a more powerful choice and a more flexible one in actual play. How could Veruca Salt, for example, demand affection when she's not in a chocolate factory? Next, we'll finish fleshing out the inner life of the characters by defining their dramatic poles. Each pole, broadly speaking, defines the character's identity, and each player is going to choose 2 poles for their character which are in conflict with each other. For example, George Bailey's poles in It's a Wonderful Life are ambition versus responsibility. Mark Thackeray's from To Stir with Love are anger versus civilization. Hamlet's are justice or revenge. Joseph Cooper's from Interstellar is torn between adventure or family. Brian O'Connor in the first Fast and the Furious movie is law or friendship. The important thing, again, is that these two identities are in conflict. This conflict of identity is what drives dramatic storytelling. Who is the character going to be? Who will they choose to be? What will they be forced to become? You'll want to make both the poles and the conflict between them as clear as possible. In most dramatic scenes featuring your character, you, the GM, and the other players will want to play into this conflict, thus creating dramatic stakes and interest. As you're playing out these scenes, note that this conflict doesn't mean that your character is wishy-washy. For example, at the end of The Fast and the Furious, Brian rejects the law and chooses family definitively, but then changing circumstances force him into fresh struggles between his two desires. George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life chooses responsibility over ambition every single time, but his story is nonetheless compelling. It is the struggle that creates dramatic interest. At some point, of course, your character might find a way to end this conflict within them. Perhaps they'll do so by definitively choosing one identity and forever rejecting the temptation of the other. Or perhaps, like George Bailey, they'll realize that the rewards from a life of responsibility and care are his true ambition, and they'll find a way to reconcile and synthesize them. Either way, this would be the conclusion of your character arc. You would either need to find what new poles are creating conflict for the character, or perhaps their story is triumphantly concluded, and it will be time for you to create a new character. Finally, we will bring our dramatic poles into focus by declaring what they lead our characters to seek from the other PCs. In an order determined by the GM, each player declares what they want from another specific PC. Examples could include love from the object of your affection, approval from a mentor, or to punish your mother. The player of that character then defines why they can't get it. I could never love one of a lower caste. If I give you approval, you would stop trying. I will not be punished when I am blameless. If necessary, both players should adjust the statement to reflect the first character's understanding of the situation. Then draw an arrow between the characters on your drama map and label it with the want. Note that it is crucial that the PC cannot get what they want at the beginning of play. If the other player feels that their character would readily grant what the first PC is asking, then the stakes must be raised or changed. Once again, this is an emotional need. Wesley's practical goal is to rescue Princess Buttercup, but his emotional need is to find out if she still loves him, or if she ever loved him. She can't immediately give him that because she thinks he's dead and he's disguising his identity. Repeat this process until all the characters are named as the objects of at least two other characters' wants. Other relationships may of course be defined and developed through play, but this will give us the seed we want to start with. Now, through this process, we have created the roles and relationships that define how and why the characters interact with each other. We've given each character a desire, complicated that desire through strong dramatic poles, and then created specific, actionable, emotional goals. Collectively, this gives you and the players a huge toolkit to use for guiding role-playing, framing scenes that focus inter-character drama, or for complicating and developing interactions in any scene. We'll be taking a closer look at scene framing in a future video, so make sure to hit the subscribe button if you don't want to miss that. Now, if you'd like a little inspiration for creating a new character right now, check out the Book of Conflict from RPCraft, the sponsor for today's video. Currently on Kickstarter, the Book of Conflict focuses on orcs, goblinoids, and other forgotten folk. It includes a ton of new mechanical content, including classes, subclasses, new gameplay mechanics, feats, spells, magical items, and monsters. But what has me most intrigued about the Book of Conflict is the lore. Goblin castes, orc upbringings, hobgoblin settlements, and bugbear tribes all promise to bring a breadth of cool cultural options and varieties to these heritages. I'm going to drop a link to the Book of Conflict Kickstarter into the font of all knowledge down below. When you head over there, don't forget to check out the cool custom DM screen that's included for backers. Good gaming. I'm Justin Alexander, and I'll see you at the table.